We begin this week with a Gemara, a little bit unique for this section. Omar Rav, says Rav, a bit of a famous Gemara. La'ilam, ye adam zahir, a person should be careful be'oina'as ishtoi, with the oppression of his wife. Why? Shemitoich, shedim asai mitsuya, the tears are coming, oinasa karoiva, her oppression is near. Gemara continues. Amar Achista. These are snippets of Gemara about Masiyah Daf Nutes. Kol Hasha'arim Min Olam. All the gates in heaven are closed. Chutz, from one gate that's still open. The Sharei Oina'ah, the gate of those who are oppressed. And finally, the third Gemara. Amar Rav Chelbai. Lahalim Yadam Zahir B'Kavod Ishtay. Be careful with the honor of your wife. Why? She'ein habracha mitzuya b'teich beisai. There is no blessing in your house, Shaladam, Ella, Bishvil, Ishtai. And the truth is, we always like to start with a little bit of chizik and shalom bayis. We can stop right now. Girls cry a lot. Their oppression is near. The gate of oppression and tears is open in heaven. And there's no blessing only because of your wife. You put it all together, and I think, if we were just to keep these few lines in our mind constantly, everyone would have much better Shalom Bayis. But just to continue for a moment, he quotes over here that the Ein Yaakov, who's a classical Pirush on the Gemara, explains that it's not only your wife, it's women in general. Women are vulnerable, emotional creatures, and therefore they're more sensitive. So we have to be careful to their feelings. What does that have to do with Parshas Mishpatim? So, Parshas Mishpatim, we have a pasuk. Kol almana v'yasayim. Any almana or a yasayim, lo yitzeh, do not oppress. Im ane sana oisai, ki im tzoi yitzik elai, says Hashem. If the almana, if the widow, or the yasam, one without a parent, cries out to me, shamaya eshma sarkasi. Says Hashem, I listen to their voice. So Rav Simcha Levine quotes his father, the famous Rav Aryeh Levine, and says, why the double wording over here? Im ane se'ane oisai. And he explains beautifully, we're talking about an almana, a woman without a husband. We're talking about a child without a parent. If you cause such a person pain, says Rav Aryeh Levine, it's a double pain. Why is it a double pain? You hurt someone, you make someone upset, you hurt them. He explains, no. Because you cause someone pain, what do? They go home, and they have someone to complain to. They kvetch to their wife, they unburden themselves, and you feel better. You get that comfort. A child goes to its parent and says, what happened today? And the child feels better. It says of Aryeh Levine, an almana, one without a spouse, one without a parent, when you make them feel bad, the oppression is doubled. Im ane se'ane oisai. And that's why we have to have extra care to such a person. He says over here a fabulous story with Rav Shlomo Zalman. This, I think it's Rav Eliyada Goldberg's father, was in Rav Shlomo Zalman Aurbach's office. And he gets a phone call, and Rav Shlomo Zalman is rummaging through his pockets looking for a piece of paper. I think it's a thing when you become a gadol. You gotta have lots of things. I have the things in my pockets. Now we just have to work on the gadol. And he's rummaging through, and he's pulling out papers and whatnot. And as the paper falls on the table, and the person who studied this, Goldberg, notices it's a bunch of women's names and phone numbers. Interesting. And Shlomo Zalman finishes the phone call, and after the phone call he says, "B'mechilas harav, I know it's not my place to ask, but probably there's something I could learn. Can I ask, what's that paper with all those women's names and numbers?" And Shlomo Zalman says, there are numbers? You don't recognize their names? Rachel, Sarah, those are all the women in our city, our town, Rechavia, that lost their husbands. Every Erev Shabbos, I call them up to wish them a good Shabbos. Probably, Shlomo Zalman was quite a busy man. His Fridays were probably quite hectic. But what did he have always in his pocket? The almana, someone who doesn't have someone to talk to go and make sure to call them. I just want to add on one more story that just came to mind, a very quick one before we continue. I don't remember which Rebbe. I think it's one of the Rebbes from Vishnitz, but don't quote me on the name. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. He calls his Gabbai, and he tells his Gabbai, dial such and such. Okay? Good gabbai, Rebbe calls, they dial. Person answers the phone, and the Rebbe says, how was the chasana? How was this? And he sits on the phone for a few minutes. How were the flowers? Did the band work out? This and that. Spends a bunch of minutes on the phone, and he hangs up. And the gabbai is sitting there and thinking, this is ridiculous. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. Tomorrow, you call the guy and ask him how everything was. And the Rebbe explained what happens after a chasna. You're driving home, husband and wife in a car, and they converse about the beautiful simcha they had. This was nice, this could have been better, this was beautiful, this one came. And the Rebbe said, this person who made a simcha doesn't have a wife. And I knew he's going to feel a little bit pain after the simcha. So I made sure to call him to have that conversation with him. An incredible lesson, hopefully we'll take away, to be zohir, not just ba'anas ishtai, but ba'anas anyone, and to be so super sensitive, which will ultimately aid everyone's shalom bayis and everyone's interpersonal relationships, b'siyata dishmaya.